Hello ladies and gentlemen of the wonderful YouTube. What is going on today? Hope you're doing well on this fabulous Monday. My name is IcyVolk, and today we're going to be talking about some more WildStar Online. We're actually going to be discussing the Esper, which is the second major class re-reveal from Carbine Studios. The first one was the Warrior, which is your archetypal fighter class, your melee tank slash DPS class from virtually any other MMO such as WoW or Terra Online. It was a very exciting class, but honestly right now I'm more stoked about the Esper, which is not your typical mage class. It's a class that uses mind tricks and illusions and projections of the weapons that you have to attack your enemies, which I found to be really cool. It's always an interesting concept for a class. So it's also similar to Guild Wars 2's Mesmer conceptually. So let's go over at some of the Esper's main characteristics. First of all, as I've said before, it's a ranged mage class, meaning that you take down enemies at a distance. It's also a telekinetic illusionist. So it's not your typical mage kind of class that fires fireballs or casts big cataclysms upon enemies. No, it's a class that uses, again, the mind and illusions to take down enemies. And you can also summon these vile creatures that you create from your mind or imagine. I just really like the concept for the Esper, and I'm really glad that it's a class that is being developed for WildStar, which is a sci-fi focused, sci-fi inspired MMO, you know? And the Esper is actually more of the fantasy type, and I always like fantasy. I've always liked it more than sci-fi, so I'm glad that this class is actually going to be available for WildStar. Moving on, the available races that are that can be chosen for the Esper are the Human and the Orn on the Exile side, and the Cassian and the Chua on the Dominion. So we only have 4 races this time instead of 6, like for the Warrior. And I'm kind of wondering why this is the case. Like, what is the main reasoning behind having 4 classes for a class and 6 races for another? So maybe it's not really a major issue, but I'm kind of interested in knowing why is that the case here. Maybe it's kind of a lore-related issue, so might want to ask that to Chad Moore, the specialist of the lore, of WildStar lore. He is the creator of the lore, after all. Moving on, the Esper is a light armor user, which means you definitely want to keep your enemies at a distance so that they won't hit you hard. So obviously, if you're a light armor user, you can't tank for your life. You're probably going to be a healer and or a damage dealer. So light armor users are usually the people who deal a lot of damage and or heal their allies and support them with all sorts of cool utility abilities, whereas the heavy armor users tend to take the damage and are the front line in a group, in a raid situation. The Esper has 2 resources that it uses. We have Focus, which is basically the equivalent of mana. So it's called Focus in WildStar. And we have Psi-Points, which are the class-specific resource for the Esper. So Focus is used on is basically used for builder abilities, and builder abilities will typically generate Psi-Points for you, which are used for spells that are really effective. The more Psi-Points you have, so the Esper can have up to 5 Psi-Points maximum, and the more Psi-Points you have, the more effective your finisher spells are. So let's say you use like a main healing spell, you know, to start healing a little bit of damage taken by your allies. Use that to build some Psi-Points, and whenever the boss lands like a major spell or physical ability upon your allies, you want to use your finisher ability, which will consume your Psi-Points, right? So that's basically how it works for the Esper. You have 2 resources, which are Focus and Psi-Points. The weapons that are used by the Esper are mainly the Psyblade, which is actually a physical weapon that the Esper carries, but never really uses to auto-attack or to attack any sort of enemy. They actually conjure up these projections, these visions, these projections of the actual weapon that fly off and annihilate enemies, and you can conjure up similar copies of your Psyblade. And actually, some of the abilities, the Psyblade abilities for the Esper, actually have the same model as your Esper. So depending on, not the Esper, the Psyblade, sorry. So depending on the model of the Psyblade worn by the user, the visual effects of some of these Psyblade abilities change according to the model worn, right? I'm a little bit confusing. I'm trying to be as clear as possible here, but I guess that's not working. Never works with me. And the other weapon that the Esper uses is Mind. So you use illusion-based tricks to destroy your enemies, and those will either consume your focus or your Psi-Points. And finally, we don't have any stances for this class. And I'll get into that in a little bit later as to why. I'll explain why this class doesn't have any stances, unlike the Warrior, which has a defensive and an offensive stance. Sorry. The class designer, by the way, for the Esper is Jade Martin, aka a Carbine developer, Assyrial. Not sure how to exactly spell that, but let's get into some of the in-depth info for the Esper. And this I actually consolidated from the AMA that was posted by Carbine on Reddit, from the official class page, and from the WildStar stream episode that was specifically focused on the Esper. And by the way, we had a lot of different environments that were showcased for the stream, and we saw how the Esper worked in a dungeon environment, and we specifically saw how healing worked for the Esper. So I'm gonna talk about that a lot right now, soon enough. So first of all, the Esper is all about summoning illusions, mind tricks, ethereal beings. The spellslinger, which is another caster type of class, ranged class, infuses his shots with elemental spells, power, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, the Esper is more of like, hey, I'm gonna play with your mind and conjure these monstrous beings that are created from my mind to kill you. Whereas with the spellslinger, you shoot bullets, but those bullets are infused with elemental power. So it's more of like a mix of the hunter and the mage from WoW, but without an actual pet. Moving on, the Esper is more of a static nuke kind of class than a kiter. The spellslinger, of course, is more of a kiter, but you know, it all depends really on your limited action set and how you set it up, and how your amp points are built. What are you trying to, like, you can customize your Esper to be more of a kiter or to fight in melee range, but ideally you'd want to make your Esper a ranged attacker. The Psyblade, again, is the Esper's main physical weapon. You use it to fight your enemies, and you conjure telekinetic images of your Psyblade instead of actually like swinging the real Psyblade. The Esper will be the class that players most familiarized with. It's your archetypal caster type class, and a lot of healers that have healed in other MMOs will be familiar with the Esper's style of healing. The Esper is apparently not the class with the fastest time to kill potential in PvP. However, the Esper's damage tends to be a less sustained and more burst focused due to the fact that they wear light armor and that they're a nuke type of mage class. The Esper healer provides a mix of sustained and burst healing, and the limited action set builder will help players determine what kind of healing output they want to bring to the table. So if you want to be more of an AoE healer, then you'd want to build into some of the AoE focused heals. Or you can be a single target healer, or you can be a mix of the both. You can really customize all of these. You can, determine those choices by customizing your limited action set. And you can have several of those limited action bar sets saved in the game, but that is currently not in the beta, apparently. Moving on, according to the official Esper class developer, this class is a great single target healer with solid sustained healing and that has the ability to burst heal in dire situations. The cooldowns of the Esper's movement-based abilities range from about 15 to 30 seconds, which is not bad at all. The average telegraph range for ranged abilities is between 25 to 30 meters. There are currently no polymorph spells for the Esper. The class was actually planned to have a polymorph spell in the past, but now there is actually a gadget item that lets you do this kind of action to polymorph an enemy and turn it into a sheep or whatever you want to turn into so that it won't attack your allies. Espers will have abilities that increase their armor artificially. So there is actually a good example of that, and it's a spell called Phantasmal Armor. It covers people in gold armor and gives them damage absorption, which is awesome. And it's a great looking spell, by the way. Espers can summon pets, which allow them to bring down enemies quicker. And they're not actual pets. They're just considered to be abilities which are temporary and uncontrollable. So the summoned pets behave as an ability instead of as living beings. So you don't assign them any commands. They just do what they're supposed to do. They only have one purpose. So let's say you want to take off threat from yourself. You'd want to summon a tanking pet called the Geist, which will take all the threat from you and tank incoming enemies for the next, 30 seconds maybe. And then you have another kind of summon which summons a healing pet which heals surrounding allies. And it can't do anything else. It can't damage enemies. It can only heal, and that's its only purpose. So summon pets have one purpose only. They're uncontrollable, and they behave as an ability. Espers have access to a greater variety of CC, of crowd control abilities, than the spellslinger, and that's kind of obvious because, as I've said before, the spellslinger is more of a kiter. So when you're kiting things, you're able to avoid damage, more damage from enemies, more so than the Esper, which is more of a staticky class, right? So when you're standing all the time and when you're not really moving, you need some kind of CC to stop the enemies from attacking you or from unleashing a major attack, So you need that CC to make up for the lack of mobility that you have. And finally, as an Esper, you don't have any mind control abilities, which I found to be kind of sad. I was really hoping that that would be a thing for WildStar, since you're kind of like this mind trick type of class, you summon illusions, you conjure these projections, why not have some kind of mind control ability? But then again, it doesn't really make sense for this class because you're not really taking over the mind of someone as an Esper. You're just playing mind tricks on them. You're not controlling their soul. You might be provoking fear within them and other kinds of emotions, but you're not really taking over the body of someone. So maybe it's a good thing that there is not a mind control ability out there. Esper players can specialize in damage over time spells rather than burst damage by tuning their character using the AMP and ability tiering systems. Certain AoE heals only heal party members, while a few other healing spells, can heal any ally of the played faction. Moving on, it is entirely possible to level as a healing-focused Esper, but keep in mind that it'll take you way longer to level than as an damage-focused Esper, obviously, you know. So ideally you want to pick the damage-specific role of the Esper. Wow, brain farts. Espers don't use any stances. Stances are reserved for tank classes, which need to alternate between mitigation and damage dealing, like the Warrior or the Stalker, which is going to be announced in about 2 weeks. Espers don't need stances because they already have a stat that increases their spell damage or healing output, you know? So they don't really need any sort... They can't even tank, first of all, so they don't really need stances. But they already have, like, a stat that affects both the DPS role and the healing role. So they don't need any kind of, like, stances or modes, so to say. The Esper's mitigation is about the same for both physical and non-physical damage, which is magical damage. And finally, this is not an Esper-specific point, but I really wanted to mention this. All classes get 30 class abilities in total, so they get 10 per type of ability. 10 for Assault, 10 for Utility, and 10 for Support. I noticed this while looking at the latest stream episode, and it seems to be the case for every class, because I think that it wouldn't be fair if one class had more spells than another. So I can confirm for sure that there are 30 classes for each class. Next week, we're going to be talking about the spellslinger, and tomorrow I'm actually going to be talking about the WildStar stream specifically and bring up some points that were discussed during the stream. So I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.